When you think of a fighter that uses the Philly shell or shoulder roll, first fighters that will no doubt come to mind are of course the likes of Floyd Mayweather, James Toney, or Pernell Whitaker. However, there was a true boxing genius before these men even came into the picture. That man, of course, was a Philadelphian himself, George Benton, the original and true master of the Philly shell. In today's video, I'm going to take a closer look at how Benton refined and made the Philly shell into what it is today, along with how his teachings have shaped and inspired some of the greatest fighters. So on that note, let's get right into it. Now before going right into Benton, there is of course the origin of the Philly shell. And back in the first half of the 20th century, there was a lot of white collar type workers who would start to go to boxing gyms for sparring and for their fitness, with many of them being successful amateur boxers themselves, and they were often referred to as gym warriors. However, these fighters didn't have the same amount of time to train like the professionals, so therefore over time developed a style of sparring so they could defend themselves in the ropes when tired. And instead of using lots of footwork, would of course use waist movement and shoulder rolls while covering up in what we know is the Philly shell or sometimes the Michigan style defense. However, once they got a second wind, would revert back to using their high guard and using footwork. The city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, and the surrounding states, such as Michigan, were well-known hotbeds for boxing talent and hard sparring. So it was only natural that eventually this style would be picked up and used to full effect. I highly recommend you check out the channels The Uma Fight Camp and Phase Boxing, which has some great information on this, and I'll leave these in the description below. Now there have been variations of the Philly shell in terms of when it came into the picture. Some of the greatest fighters using this so-called shoulder roll technique or crossed-armed crab style. This includes legendary fighters such as Sugar Ray Robinson and Joe Louis, but maybe it was the old mongoose Archie Moore who really refined and was a great pioneer in using the shoulder roll to dodge shots and of course counter-punch. But despite some of these old stars using variations of the shoulder roll, there was however a true master of the style. Now you could consider George Benton one of the greatest fighters not to win a world title, and was unlucky not to get his shot in the end, as he defeated 4 future and former world champions in Freddie Little, Jimmy Ellis, Joey Jardello, and the great Cuban fighter Luis Rodriguez. And he finished with a professional record of 61 wins, 13 losses and 1 draw. In terms of Georgie Benton's style, it was simply his masterful use of the Philly shell, while being an aggressive counter-puncher for the most part, while he had a tremendous ability to slip and roll punches, making you miss while waiting for the right moment to counter-punch with his right hand. However, there was a key factor for Benton, like with many of the old school fighters and shell users, was that he would use a bladed stance off the centre line to his right, with his left shoulder on the centre line ready to roll to protect his chin, while his left hand would also be ready to cover his lower body. In the case of his right hand, it was always ready to catch or parry shots away, usually just keeping it under his chin, always ready to defend. While sometimes he would put it out to the side to give a tempting opening for competitors to attack, no doubt for him to look for a counter-punch opportunity. Benton would usually like to catch or parry before quickly slipping the punch to his right and moving out of range, returning with a jab or using it as an opportunity to get on the inside. While in the pocket, he would keep his right hand very tight to block left hooks to the body or head. And like we see with a lot of Philly shell style fighters to this day, he put a lot of weight on the back right foot to allow him to roll and bend at the waist more easily to dodge punches, along with the transfer of weight when throwing his power punches. And watching Benton duck, roll and dodge shots is just beautiful to watch for any boxing purist, and how quickly he was able to shoulder roll and block shots. Another huge part of his success was his balanced and fundamental footwork. Just like many of the great old-timers, he would never overexert himself by hopping and jumping around a lot. Instead, he would look to use slow or quick shuffle movements forward and backward, always maintaining the proper stance and maintaining distance to attack or defend. In terms of his offense, Benton was in fact very patient, always staying in that mid to close range. And this is why, in my opinion, I would say he's probably more of an aggressive counterpuncher. I'd say he resembles more the likes of James Toney or an older Bernard Hopkins, probably compared to the likes of Mayweather, who like to move around a lot more. I would say this is mainly because George was able to sit in the pocket and stand his ground in the centre ring for much longer while trading on the inside. Very much like his future student in Pernell Whitaker, who was also very capable of doing this at times. Benton also had an excellent jab where he would usually fire as an up jab. Quite often, he would throw these in multiples, helping to keep off his opponent, but also to condition his opponent to narrow his guard. And this is where you really get to see Georgie's terrific ring IQ come into play, and his opponent would start to expect nothing but the jab, and was able to change this eventually by throwing a surprise lead left hook around the guard of his opponent. While this was also helped just by his use of head feints and feinting with the lead hand before throwing and moving out of range again. And a prime example of this was when he faced Johnny Smith, where he was able to set up that lead left hook, followed by the right to knock him out. In terms of his counter-punching, it would of course be his terrific right cross counter, where he'd quite easily use the Philly shell roll or a simple slip return right counter. But once again, it was his brilliant IQ and timing by Benton, as he would usually look to condition his opponent by him catching and parrying and slipping jabs, without countering. But over time though, and once he felt he had his opponent conditioned, he's able to counter them with a counter right hand they were not expecting. While he would also look to set up things like the check left hook, as we've seen the likes of Floyd Mayweather use when he knocked out Ricky Hatton many years later. While Benton's shell stance was also suited for fighting on the inside, always looking to keep his head on the left shoulder leaning in, while looking to land body shots with hooks and set up the right uppercut. While he would also look to frame off the shoulder to create a gap so he could get off a sharp left hook to the body or head. And although Benton is more or less considered a defensive master, offensively he could be just as lethal or rugged. From analysing George Benton's fighting days, it's no surprise he was later called the Professor, and apparently was quoted saying he knew 48 ways to counter the jab. And from watching him, I believe him. In 1970, Benton was shot in the back by a man seeking revenge for an incident involving Benton's brother and sister. Although Benton fought back and survived the attack, the bullet chipped and lodged into his spine, forcing him to retire from boxing. However, for George, this may have been his true calling, as he went on to be regarded as one of the best boxing trainers we've ever seen. Firstly, he teamed up with Joe Frazier and acted as an assistant under one of the greatest trainers of all time, Eddie Futch, being in the corner for the Thrilla in Manila, while he also assisted in helping train Leon Spinks before his huge upset win versus Ali. However, it was when he teamed up with Hall of Famer Louis Duva, as he went on to train some of the famous 1984 Olympic team in Evander Holyfield, Meldrick Taylor, Tyrell Briggs, and maybe the fighter that resembled his defensive wizardry the most, Pernell Whitaker. And although Pernell was a southpaw, you can definitely tell Sweet Pea picked up a thing or two from the great Georgie Benton, saying the following about his former trainer. It was always a teachable moment with George. There was always something in the ring that he was able to talk to me about. He gave me everything from the old school that worked for me, and it worked, whether it was aiming for the chest or aiming for the shoulders, just the way he fought in the 50s and 60s. I fell in love with that style of fighting, and I was able to put that out there along with the skills and speed that I already had. It was a gift given to me, and a gift that nobody else had. You just need to watch some of Purnell's defensive rolls, slips and movement, and you can definitely tell Benton had a huge influence in his overall style and approach when it came to fighting in the ring. Well, even Philly Shell user Floyd Mayweather heaped praise on George's student, who was a big influence in his career.
Before I go into any championship fight, I always think about Pernell Whitaker.
Did that?
The reason why I think about Pernell Whitaker is because he was a small guy like myself, and he was able to move up in weights and beat big guys. Naturally. And he has skills, and I got skills, and I'm able to move up and beat big guys that's bigger.
With Meldrick Taylor and Holyfield, you can tell it was more his advice around inside fighting where they really benefited. For example, Benton took advantage of Taylor's magnificent speed on the inside. In his fight versus Buddy McGirt, George gave terrific advice around doubling up the jab.
George Benton and do that.
Like what you ever, because he's leaping at you. Now you're, look, I'll give you a little more jab. You understand? Hey, right there, right. Double up on the jab, listen. No, I want to hear. See? There.
Evidence there of what the jab can do for Meldrick, Alex.
And George says he doesn't want the jab just on the head. He wants it on the shoulders, on the chest, any place. Buddy McGirt slips with his head very well. It's easier to hit him with a jab on the shoulders or on the body.
While in the 12th and final round, he tried to encourage him by using Henry Armstrong's style to help him finish off the job.
Now look, Henry Armstrong, you got to get it. I lost it. Okay, Henry Armstrong, yeah. But slow down.
Last round, TNT.
Hold it. Start off moving. He start off moving, jabbing him. Confusing. Then Armstrong.
Henry Armstrong always did was stay in punching range. Even when he stopped punching, he moved to the side, so he was always in range to hit his opponent.
While with Holyfield, you would often see him lean in with his head on his opponent's left shoulder, just like Benton, before taking the opportunity to attack to the body with hooks and framing off the shoulder. Benton was also a very strategic trainer who analysed fighting styles and drilled his fighters to adapt and conquer who they were facing. An example of this was when he was training Evander Holyfield, who anticipated a specific move from James Buster Douglas, as he would usually jab before throwing an uppercut from distance. In the training camp leading up to the fight, he consistently got Holyfield to train over and over again to be ready for the counter right straight, which resulted in him winning the heavyweight title in the 3rd round. It was a similar move Benton had mastered all those years before and was able to pass on his knowledge. Former US Olympic coach Al Mitchell summed up why Benton was such a good trainer and fighter.
He was a hell of a fighter. Matter of fact, we used to call him the uncrowned champ. He was an unbelievable fighter, but he was a good defense genius too. He trained Pernell Whitaker. He trained Holyfield. He trained Meldrick Taylor. All them fighters from the dudes that camped in, he trained them.
Would you credit him with inventing the shoulder roll? A lot of the
Definitely.
trainers I talked to say he was the first.
He was the first one I seen do it. Georgie Benton. He's the first one.
What do you think made Georgie Benton so good of a fighter? So great of a
Old schoolers. Old school. They teach the defense, they teach offense. The number one thing, they teach the basics.
In conclusion, the Philly Shell defense technique is an essential part of many modern boxers right now. But it was George Benton who was the original master of the technique, and he revolutionized the sport with this innovative style of fighting. Obviously the center line is the critical element of the technique, and it's essential to keep your head off it, while also being able to have the reactions and reflexes to use this style in perfection. We have seen over the years this technique evolve over time, with many modern fighters such as Floyd Mayweather Jr., James Toney, giving their own twist to the technique, but still sticking to the fundamentals that Benton had put in place. From studying Georgie Benton in the 1950s and 60s, it's clear that not only was he a defensive master, but he also had unbelievable ring IQ like many Philly shell fighters do to this day, and this was proven by some of his devastating blows through his setups, while also being able to battle it out on the inside. And the knowledge he took from his fighting days into training is evident by how many great champions he worked with, and it's no wonder so many of his students gave him the suitable nickname of the Professor. And for me, he will always be the original Philly shell master. Hi guys, Jimmy from Boxing Life. Just want to say a huge thank you for watching today's video on George Benton. True master in the ring and definitely an innovator in using the Philly shell. Make sure to let me know in the comments below what you thought of him. And yeah, I just wanted to quickly tell you about the launch of my Patreon page, where you can get early access to all my videos or anything that gets blocked on YouTube, along with exclusive content which I will be posting more consistently on there going forward. And yeah, if you just want to continue supporting the channel so we can make more content like this, make sure to check it out in the link in the description below. As always guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.